Hi, good evening. Welcome to the first of the two May Somerville Historic Preservation Commission meetings. It is May 2nd, 6:46 p.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before proceeding, I should say, pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Act of 2023, this meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. The recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. It looks like about 5 demolition-related cases tonight, but before we go into that, we'll do our customary introductions. Starting on my top left of my screen, Mr. Bauer.
I'm Dick Bauer. I'm an attorney and I was trained as a city planner and I live in Spring Hill neighborhood.
Mr. Chagnon.
I'm DJ Chagnon. I'm a landscape architect and a resident of Ward 5.
Falvey.
Hi, I'm Ryan Falvey. I'm a resident of Ward 2.
And Vice Chair Kelly.
Hi, I'm Robin Kelly. I am the Realtor representative on the commission and also a historic homeowner in Union Square.
I'm Eric Parks, the chair, resident of Ward 3, historic homeowner and architect. And our staff with Ms. Chekowicz is here in the background.
Oh. Yes, hello. I am Wendy Chekowicz, historic preservation planner and planner for the city of Somerville. And I would, Mr. Chairman, just through you for a second, for our commission, if anyone isn't speaking, if you can mute yourself just to eliminate that echo.
We don't, you're okay. Excellent. So we, as I mentioned, we have, I think, 5 demolition delay related cases. And for folks who are new to this process, I'll give the quick synopsis. The demolition delay ordinance in Somerville is it's a 2-step process. And any building that's over 75 years old automatically comes to us for review, regardless of its condition or anything like that. The first step is what we call the determination of historic significance. And that is a process that is a little bit more narrowly tailored towards the building itself and its existing, its architectural merit. There's a list of criteria, either importantly associated with people and the history of the city, architectural style, its relevance in the context of the buildings around it, or to what extent it reflects the broader architectural or economic patterns of the city. But criteria like that. If we determine that a building rises to the level of being historically significant and we vote it that way, the next month we hold another public hearing in which we determine whether it is preferably preserved. And that is a hearing where we take more public input and we review a broader collection of aspects to do with its condition, decide whether it's better that that building be kept or not. If we determine it is preferably preserved, then that begins an 18-month delay, during which we are to review with the owner options for preserving the building. It doesn't always result in the place being preserved. Sometimes the demolition delay, we come to an agreement well before that either involves keeping it, or in some cases we'll say, all right, it can be demolished with some conditions, whether it be memorialization or incorporating details from the building to something new, or it depends on the circumstance. So that is the process. And so the first category tonight of building that we're going to review is HPC DMO 2023.05. The address is 23 Glenwood Road. The applicant is the Grace Spellenberg Revocable Living Trust. The owner is the same as the applicant. And the applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Do we have an applicant here tonight?
Will the applicant for this team please raise your hand? Anne Vigorito, you have been unmuted on our end.
Oh, let's get on this fucking meeting.
Anne, you are still muted on your side. If there's anyone else from the applicant team for this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. And I see your hand is up. You are still self-muted, but you're unmuted on our side. One second, Mr. Chairman. There we go.
Sorry about that. I had to use another device. Something weird was happening. I was on a neighborhood meeting last night and it happened to one of my team members, not me. So can't fight with the Wi-Fi. In any event, Ann Vigorito, I'm an attorney, 424 Broadway here in Somerville, Massachusetts, representing 23 Glenwood. The owner is on the hearing. They're just here to listen. So I will do a brief presentation. This is a property that has had extensive alterations, vinyl siding, vinyl windows, doors, new roof. The front porch addition truly masks the original structure of the home. The large bay window in the back was added not too long ago, maybe 30 years ago. I guess there was a removal of the original dormer window because that's how they got the red bay window. There's also been a second story addition added. Looking at this, the original massing has been overwhelmingly distorted, I think, over the years, so we don't really see what was there. I mean, the house is still in the original site it was built, but there's all these additions and distortions to it. So our request is that the building or the house not be found significant. We feel it's not of significance, and hope you feel the same. I am going to attempt to mute myself so that there's no distortion. I don't know why it's giving me a hard. So if you'd like, I can mute myself at this time so that, or if you have questions for me.
No, I think we would, are you it for the applicant?
I am.
Okay.
He is on and he's listening.
Okay. If that's the case,
Chairman,
then
if I may, we've been asked to put up the picture stuff that's in the staff so that
Okay.
audience members can see. Could I ask to have that done for these cases, please?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm sorry, what was the request?
The
that we
request is
show,
show the audience the things in the staff report that we are looking at.
Okay, so would you like the staff report shared? Exactly.
please. Yes.
Okay, 1 second, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. If that's the next step in this hearing would be then to take public comment, and we'll leave the staff report up, and we could scroll through it as people request. And if anybody would like to speak, you can raise your hand and you'll be unmuted.
Any members of the public wishing to make a comment on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period.
While we're waiting on that, I'll point out, I think we received a detailed letter of this petition for this case, did we not? Which I read.
Mr. Chairman, so there's a slight issue. I cannot share my screen during public comment because I have to unmute and mute people, and so it's going to keep flicking in and out of your faces, and the staff report. Can I put it up at the end of public comment?
Sure. I mean, we need to hear the public, so whatever it takes. And if we have to, it can toggle back and forth or something.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Courtney Koslow, you are self-muted, but you have been unmuted on our end.
Hi, thank you for taking this public comment. My name is Courtney Koslow. I live at 11 Glenwood Road, just a few houses down. And I believe that the commission received a letter from a number of neighbors who feel very strongly that our street of beautiful mansards are collectively a valuable historically. This house, I strongly disagree with the comments before that the massing has been overwhelmingly distorted. This house is a beautiful representation of this period of time and looks very similar to all of the other houses on the street that have had some additions but maintain, or some modifications, but overall maintain the quality. Losing a mansard like this will impact this wonderful feel of our neighborhood. The mansards are part of our identity here. We feel really proud of them. I feel really lucky to be a steward of one and continue to keep it on into the future. I believe that there are different approaches that an applicant and the owner may take. I don't believe any of us have any concerns about adding units to the site, making it more denser, making it denser, and doing other things that would provide additional housing opportunities in our neighborhood. I personally would support that, but I do not believe that there's any reason to knock this building down to accomplish that. We've seen other examples in the city of historic buildings being preserved with additions added and more units included. And so I would recommend that that you all vote to determine this as a historically significant building. Thank you.
I'm on a. I just want to make sure.
Any other members of the public with their hands raised, please?
I'm at a historic.
Just raise your hand.
For the demolition of my building.
There is yes, there's someone who isn't muted in here.
My property right now, so I mean, I can.
It's the property owner. Can the property owner please mute himself?
Okay, thank you. Please raise your hand if you would like to give a 2-minute public comment on this item. Pearl Emmons, you have been unmuted on our end. You would just need to unmute yourself to speak.
I didn't mute it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Pearl Emmons. I live at 30 Glenwood Road and own a 2-family. It's almost across the street from the property. I'm also a real estate agent in the area, and so I spend a lot of time driving around and looking at neighborhoods in Somerville. And I believe that these mansards on this street are very historic in nature and unique in the fact that it was one of a very early subdivision, essentially, of Boston and in Somerville. We had a set of, sorry, I'm getting an echo. Okay. We had a set of mansards go up on this street, all very similar in style, built by the same builder, and they really give our street identity and it is rooted in the mid-1800s, and I do not want that to go away. Although the street has been very deeply filled in between these mansards, they only live between Medford Street and Vernon Street, and they are pride, essentially. Some have been very messed up, have even lost their front, and I feel that it is sad that that has happened. I know it's happened to 2 of them, but people can make them larger and can maybe add more space, more units without taking away the mid-1800s identity that these mansards bring to our street. And I believe that Finn, who wrote the letter that you all have in the history that we've signed, can't raise his hand. So I just want to make sure that he's able to talk if he wants to. Okay, I'm finished.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify, staff can see his hand raised. So I think he managed to figure, or no, he added a question. So we can see him. We'll make sure to unmute him when we get to further down the list. All right, Amy Stein, you are unmuted. You will just need to unmute yourself.
Hi, did that work?
Yes.
I live at 24 Glenwood Road. We're directly across the street from the house in question. And I also agree with what everyone's saying. And I would just like to point out again that the house has maintained its mansard shape. And if you come and see our street, the mansards are the overwhelming, like they kind of create the beauty of our street. And that old photo you can see in the packet or the letter shows what the street originally looked like and how old it is. Like if you look at the top of the hill, there's no other buildings. Like it's just our houses, and around us there's no other buildings. And as for the historic history of the street, that the man that built the houses also supplied the Red Sox with their uniforms, and I guess that's on the letter. You don't need to hear me repeat it, but the houses are so unique and unlike anything else. And they're also just so old. And many people have done restoration on their house. And in fact, right next door to 23, someone is doing a full gut renovation without ruining the shape of the mansard house. And as for the original, the attorney for the said property owner, the extensions that they're talking about were done in the probably like late 10s, early 1920s. So they were like also historic extensions. Almost no one has done like a proper extension except for the condo. There's a condo that got kind of destroyed, a mansard that was destroyed and made into condos, but that also happened in like the 60s. So it's just the historic nature of the street is just so beautiful. If you come to the street and you see everyone who's had a mansard and has the opportunity to own one of these beautiful houses has spent a lot of time, effort, money, and love to restore them and keep them beautiful as opposed to knocking them down. And if someone actually does do a full gut renovation, what they do is they keep the shape. So that's my vote for keeping the shape of the house and keeping the kind of integrity of our street. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Ron Cavallo, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street, Somerville, Mass., a frequent contributor to this commission. I hear all the neighbors speaking about this house, and it's clear to me that there's a lot of positive feelings about the house, and I fully respect that. I understand that it is part of the context of the neighborhood. I understand that it is a mansard, and my position is that, yes, most of the original structure is visible. I'm clearly pro-development, and I've made a number of comments about this commission and the impact this commission has had on the city, most of which I think is largely negative in terms of creating development and opportunity for the city. And I note that the amount of development in the city for small projects is down to almost nothing. And I'm very concerned about the tax base and the economic impact of limitations on development in the city. However, I do believe that this building should be preserved, but I would also like it to see it brought into 2024 and be revitalized as a building that would be modern in the sense that it would conform to new energy codes and have a positive impact on the environment. So I would suggest that this building, a plan should be developed for this building that would allow for additional units, which would incentivize the rehabilitation of this structure and the modernization of the structure. but maintain the original form and substance of the structure. So I'm proposing that this building be economically viable and allow additional units if possible, so that it makes economic sense and that the city is brought forward. I see the city largely at a standstill for all these projects, small projects, looking at the limitations on condominium conversions and the limitations on small development in general. And I note that the development community has largely left the city. And I think there's a happy medium here that would allow for the preservation of the structure, but the addition of additional units so that it makes economic sense. And that we upgrade the city, not continually downgrade the city, which is what I see happening with all these small projects that are essentially getting denied, or with the development community that has essentially walked away from the city. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you.
Finian Moore-Coretti, you have been unmuted on our end.
Yeah, hi there, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, so I just wanted to speak in favor of preservation. I live at 24 Glenwood, directly across the street, so I've had a front row seat to this beautiful house for many years. I'm also one of the neighbors that signed and submitted a letter with supporting documentation on the specific question before this commission of historic significance. So thank you, Chairman Parks, for mentioning that. I hope everyone's had a chance to read it, or at least flip through it, because there's one beautiful archival photo there that's been mentioned that I think really shows that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I wanted to emphasize one aspect that didn't, I think, come through in the staff report, and that is, to assess the historic significance of this house, it has to be in the context of this group of 15 structures. In reaching out to other folks like active in preservation in Somerville, like Ed Gordon, who used to serve on this commission, it became clear to me that this truly is one of the oldest intact Victorian era subdivisions anywhere in the city, and that it probably is the largest single array of matching mansard houses anywhere in Somerville. I'm aware that the Second Empire style, which is part of the architectural significance here, is pretty common in New England. But that said, this array of houses is extremely unusual. And so a decision, the fate of 23 Glenwood will influence the fate of all these other houses. And I think especially in light of a Green Line development, the commission would do well to go slow on this and consider its historic significance and preservation, because it could be a domino effect. Once one of these houses is demolished, what's to stop the next and the next and the next? I just wanted to speak briefly to a few points in that dossier. I'll be very quick, that relate to the question of historic significance. First, the developer, Horace Partridge, is well known to history buffs in Somerville. He did develop a lot of real estate. He did speculate, but this development was important to him and special to him. He named the street Jenny Lind Avenue. That's named for a Swedish opera singer, but it's also the name of Horace Partridge's daughter. So the street was actually named not just for the opera singer, but for the daughter of the developer. Point two, 23 Glenwood was in the name of Martha A. Partridge, his wife, so I've referred to it as the Martha A. Partridge House. I would argue that the block itself was important to the family, and he installed his daughter Nellie Rose Partridge in the adjoining house, number 11 Glenwood, and William Nickerson, her husband, who lived in that house around this time, invented the Gillette razor. And is also a person of historic significance. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that you have a house which is under consideration, but it needs to be considered as a part of an architectural array. And its historic significance lies not only in the house itself, but in its participation in this array, which really is one of the kind of the original real estate landscape of the Winter Hill area. And to the points raised by the lawyer representing the applicant, I would completely disagree. The front porch was added to many of these houses within a few decades after their construction, and indeed, all the mansard houses on the block now have this front porch. It doesn't obscure the architectural features in any way, shape, or form. Whatever siding is on 23 Glenwood could be removed. I have no doubt clapboard is underneath, and I would surmise that a slate roof is also underneath the siding on the roof line. And if the commission would take a closer look as well at our dossier, you can see plenty of pictures of neighboring houses built at this exact same time that have suffered some of the same challenges, but have been restored by their owners. So I think the designation of preferably preserved is very much warranted in this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking for any raised hands that we missed. All right. Sarah Lennox, you have been unmuted on our end.
Okay.
You'll just need to unmute yourself.
I think I am unmuted. Am I correct?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I live at number 38 Ames Street on the corner of Bartlett Street, 1 block to the east of Glenwood Road. My husband and I walk frequently in this neighborhood, and one of the things we particularly love is the architectural coherence of the streets that we walk on. If you walk on Glenwood Road, there are the mansards. If you walk on our street, on Ames Street, there's a cluster of single-family Victorians built in 1890 as a development, serving a somewhat different group of people. These were commuter rail houses because of the proximity to the stop on Central Street. But this aspect of Somerville as a historic place is very significant to us. We think that, unlike the speaker who said that Somerville has been stagnant and not brought forward, we think that these historic representations, these bits of our history that live in the structures do bring the city forward. When we walk past the multi-block place at Maxwell's Green, yes, there are many structures there. However, they're not for the affordable average person in Somerville. They're tremendously expensive. This house is on a double lot. Half of it appears to be empty. If that empty lot were to be developed into affordable housing for people who wanted to live in a historic district, that would be fantastic. But to just demolish it for the purpose of building a large number of condos or apartments that affluent people can inhabit is really not in the best interest of either our neighborhood or the city. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment. All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go through the list one more time, but currently I don't see anyone else's hands up. Mr. Chairman, there are no raised hands, so you may close the public comment.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing, and we will take it up to commission. And also just to reiterate that the document that was submitted, I think, was signed by 17 people, mostly on this street, and that's was very in depth. And I appreciate your the research that you all did. Helps augment the information that our staff has prepared for this as well. Anyway, who wants to weigh in first here?
I will share that I concur and would like to echo your sentiments about the letter provided by, submitted by the neighbors and the research that they did and the effort that they put forward with that. It's very helpful. And I agree with everything that's been noted about the form and massing, the contribution to the streetscape, and the importance of this structure to the immediate neighborhood. And so I am fully in favor of finding this property historically significant.
Mr. Chair, I'm joining in on that. All of those comments, including Vice Chair Kelly's. This seems like to me an obvious candidate for being historically significant, and I certainly would vote for that. And I also want to give a vote of thanks to the neighbors who have sent the letter and spoken, not only for their words and comments, but for pulling all the materials together.
Thank you.
I have nothing in particular to add to that other than echoing what Vice Chair Kelly and Mr. Bauer have both said and what many of the neighbors expressed and so forth. And I think, yeah, nothing particularly to add. I mean, I think the historical associations, both of the person and the developer and the context, and with the broader, social history of worker housing and development patterns of the city, all pretty much speak for themselves in this case. And the architectural coherence of the whole block and the streetscape. Significance feels like a self-answering question in a lot of ways.
Wendy, just for the benefit of anyone who hasn't seen it, could you pull up on the report the photo that someone submitted? It's a shot of the street with just the original cottage on it. I think it's really an interesting shot.
Yes, let me pull up the report.
While you're doing that, well, actually, Ryan, Mr. Falvey, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I totally agree with the sentiments that have been expressed. And this picture, I think just, speaks volumes. And this to me just seems like a no-brainer, and I think it's really wonderful how articulate and enthusiastic the neighbors are about this property. And I think it's great to see that kind of engagement.
Yes.
Yeah, this is really, I'm actually really kind of thrilled to see this picture. It's really interesting to see that, because when I walk down the street, because there's been infill, and just looking at the plot plan, it looks like that they pre-developed every other lot, but left the lots individual. So it's not like each lot was subsequently subdivided. They just decided to pepper the neighborhood with these houses and then leave them every other one blank for the future. But it's really, I can't think of any other street that has this kind of a collection of these little mansard cottages. We have areas that have a number of them. That's usually a gathering of 2 or 3 together, but nothing like this. And I would say, yes, there's been some modification to the rear and to the back side of the house, but it's done in such a way that you can completely perceive the massing of the house, and you get, the original gist of it is still quite there.
Yeah.
So I understand there's development pressure and all that, and I would just hope that that the applicant is respectful of this situation here in how they move forward. But anyways, in terms of significance, I could concur. This is a significant property. It's worth keeping.
In that case, I move that we vote to find the property historically significant.
Second the motion.
By Mr. Falvey. I have a motion for significance put forward by Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor, say aye. Yes. Opposed? And we'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon?
Yes.
Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So thank you, everybody. We'll bring this case forward next month for a preferably reserved hearing and go from there.
Thank you, Chairman Parks and members of the commission. I do have the last item on the agenda. I'm going to sign out of this one because I want to make sure I don't have any further technical difficulties. So I will see you at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I don't know if I missed it, but did you vote on findings?
I was.
Oh, right. Yeah, I got it ahead of myself. Okay. Well, findings, I would put forward the relationship of the house is a reflection of its original development of Mansard cottages. There's the architectural connection. There's the streetscape, and in that it relates to that largely intact original character that way. There was the association with some important people. The developer, the Partridge, Horace Partridge was a very significant developer, did a lot of work around the city. There was the, I don't think it was this house, but the person who invented the safety razor, which I thought was really interesting. I think that might have been the daughter or the son-in-law or something like that. I don't remember exactly. So there, I'd say that there are findings could be made on a variety of fronts that way. Anybody want to add to that or tweak it?
I think that covers it. We have integrity of the building. We have historical associations of the people, and we have the streetscape.
Yeah.
It really does check all the boxes.
All right. In that case, do we have a motion? Yes.
I move that we vote to adopt the findings as just described.
I'll second that. Okay, someone will second
DJ got it.
Motion by Mr. Kelly.
Okay.
Seconded by Mr. Shagnon. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Okay. Next, we have two more determinations of significance for two adjacent properties on Pearl Street, which we will hear individually, even though they are next to each other. And the first one is HPC DMO 2023.02, 236 Pearl Street. Applicant is Barrows Properties LLC. The owner is Good Pitch LLC. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Do we have an applicant here tonight?
Will the applicant for this item please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. Adam Dash, you have been unmuted.
Thank you, Wendy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Superb. Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street, Somerville, representing the applicant Barrows Properties LLC. As the chair stated, this is for 236 Pearl Street, although this and the next one, 234 Pearl Street, are companion cases with the same owner. Tony Barrows from Barrows Properties is here. If we could promote him. And Marilyn Modinger of Runcible Studios, the architect with a background in historic preservation. Also, I'd like her to be involved with the presentation if we could allow her to speak as well. So this is a significance hearing regarding the 236 Pearl Street, which is a commercial building. The building certainly does not have an appearance which says historically significant. Per the staff report, I would note that the use changed from its original residential use, that there were some original buildings which apparently were at least partly subsumed into a very different commercial structure and unified into the one, and they're not visible except for a few possible clapboard parts of the exterior, and it is not clear how much of the original buildings are left of that. The height changed to go from 2 stories to 1 story. Alterations have occurred which changed its appearance over time. And it's hard to say the original massing remains largely intact when a whole floor was removed and there are no longer separate buildings, and the staff report admits that it's unclear how much of the existing structure even exists. Marilyn had written a memo, and she is more the expert than I, and I would like to see if Marilyn Modinger, if you want to walk the commission through your memo real quick.
Marilyn Modinger, this is Wendy Chekowitz. Do you have a presentation? Because if so, I can promote you so that you can make a presentation.
I do not have a presentation other than verbal presentation.
Not a problem.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Marilyn Modinger. architect based in Cambridge. So I think the staff report did a good job of explaining, as it always does, of explaining what we have here. In my view, I obviously couldn't see some of the more in-depth things that the staff report was able to uncover. So from my view, it looked as if the original building had largely been demolished completely. So or what didn't exist. So I did look at some of the maps and things, and saw that the original house seemed to be completely gone. I guess what we've learned from the staff report is that it isn't gone as much as it is subsumed, which I suppose from a historic standpoint largely means gone. The building that exists currently is from the outside sort of a brick industrial 1-story-ish, 2-ish story kind of thing, and does not has some sort of funny shapes to it. There's a gable volume on the roof. There's a portion of flat roof around the back of the building. There's you can see some of these funky roof lines. Most of the building is clad in vinyl that is not brick. And then there's also this sort of metal steel false front that's, for lack of a better term, like a sort of a Western building that has a sort of false front on the front. So if you saw my letter, did not find it to be significant, and don't say that lightly. So yeah, more sort of details and thoughts if needed, but that's the quick take.
Thank you, Marilyn. This is Adam Dash again. Wendy, can you put up the picture of the building, or just it's on the front of the staff report if you want to just do that. I mean, the windows are currently a mix of vinyl replacement and wood. Most of them have been covered with painted wood, no longer function as windows or openings. The doors, mix of fiberglass and steel. Several doors have been covered over or altered, including what look like to be larger garage door openings that have been infilled with a mix of painted wood and concrete. This is a second floor gable volume and second floor flat roof volume. It's not possible to tell whether these are later additions, but they're vinyl clad and they certainly have no remarkable historical features. And Marilyn mentioned this false front business. As you can see, I mean, this is a brick block commercial building. I mean, it may be old, but it has few interesting exterior features. It's been extensively altered, patched, and added onto, and had a floor removed through its history, such that it no longer retains its original massing or integrity. It's not unique, noteworthy, or outstanding in any way. It does not meet the criteria for significance as to persons, events, or history, and its location with a park across the street calls for its replacement with a more suitable structure through demolition of this structure and the 234 Pearl Street one, which is coming up next. And this would better meet the public interest for the neighborhood there rather than keeping these existing structures. Therefore, applicant asks that the commission not find this 236 Pearl Street structure significant. Thank you.
Thank you. Assuming that's it for y'all, then we would move to the public comment portion of this hearing. Does anybody, a member of the public, like to speak? Now's your time.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. Adam Dash, as I go through the list, if you could just mute yourself just to eliminate any background noise. I see your mic is still on.
It's on because I'm afraid if I turn it off, it won't go back on again, but I will give it a shot.
Fair enough. All right, Ron Cavallo, you have been unmuted on our end. If you would, and I see you're unmuted on yours as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I see this as a perfect example of a building that has absolutely no value historically or architecturally. And as I've repeated, well, firstly, I should have reintroduced myself. Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street. I'm a constituent. I remain very concerned about the fact that the majority of the small developers have left the city, and I remain very concerned about the city's ability to actually implement what I think is a completely unrealistic goal of being net zero by 2050, given all the restraints and constraints on development that the city imposes. And the fact that small development has basically come to a halt along with condo conversions is of great concern for me, especially given the dire need for infrastructure improvements and the reduction in the aggregate amount of money that is the city generates through assessments and taxation. I think this building has no value. I fully support its demolition. I fully support an increase in development in this city. I think the task of this commission is to preserve that which is of significance. I've seen this commission, what I believe has overreached on way too many occasions. I strongly support the demolition of this structure. I think taking this building down is part of a necessary revitalization of the city. I remain very concerned about the constraints on development and the negative economic impact on the city caused by those constraints. That's the end of my statement.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand for a 2-minute public comment period. Mr. Chairman, there are no other members of the public wishing to speak on this item. I will note that Tony Barros, who is the applicant for the item, does have his hand raised. If you would like to let him speak after, well, he put his hand down, so maybe not. I'll check afterwards, but if you would like to give him a chance to speak after the public comment period.
Sure.
Other than that, you may close the public comment.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing, and if Mr. Barros would like to speak, feel free to unmute him.
Tony Barros, if you wish to speak, you are unmuted on our end. If not, we can go, you're not required, but if you'd like to.
Yeah, it was an accident, but hello, good evening.
Hi.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Chairman, there's no one else with their hands raised.
All right. Well, who has thoughts on this in the commission? Oh, and before we go, I had this little deja vu moment. I have a picture of the back side of this house from 1953, looking down that hill. You can see what was there once upon a time. It's definitely not what you see now.
I will share that my thoughts are this is a total hodgepodge. There's nothing that I'm finding that has historic merit in terms of design or even material. It just is too chaotic and unremarkable. So I don't see that it has historic significance.
To follow up on that, I think I agree with Vice Chair Kelly. I think that the architectural significance and character of both of the original home and even to a large extent of the industrial building that came after it along the backside are all pretty well shot, and there's not much of them left. I found from a social history perspective, the idea of the metalworking shop and Somerville's contribution to the World War II war effort was interesting, but it doesn't, to me, rise to the level of significance that would make this importantly associated with that, in that there's nothing in the architecture itself that really reflects or speaks to that in any way to me.
Any other thoughts?
I share the sentiments expressed by Vice Chair Kelly and Commissioner Chagnon also.
I'm willing to let it go.
Yeah, I concur. There's practically speaking, nothing left from the original structure on the street, and the industrial part in back isn't really speaking to any kind of industrial architecture. It is interesting to see that kind of hodgepodgey growth pattern that happens. But, yeah, I don't find any reason for significance on this.
I move that we vote to find the property. How are we doing this these days? I get confused. We either are saying that it's historic and then a no, we do the no vote, or with the new format of the minutes, do we want to say that we're not going to find it significant?
No, I think we should do it the way you first suggested, Vice Chair Kelly.
Okay, then I move that we vote to find the property historically significant. A yes vote would indicate that it is significant. A no vote would indicate it is not.
Motion by Vice Chair Kelly. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor of the motion put forward by Vice Chair Kelly, say aye or yes. All
Yes.
opposed? Oh, wait.
Oh, I'm
Did you-
sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, all opposed? No.
Nay.
No.
I'll do the roll call. Mr. Bauer,
No,
Mr. Shagnon,
No.
Mr. Falvey,
No.
Vice Chair Kelly,
No.
and I'll vote no. And for adopting findings, I would just say that it lacks integrity. It's historic integrity. It is not, doesn't appear to be socially associated with any important people or architectural styles, trends, economic patterns.
Does not contribute to the streetscape.
Right. Those three things I think do it. And other additions?
I move that we adopt those as the findings.
I second that.
Seconded by Vice Chair Kelly. All in favor of adopting those findings, say aye.
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 Opposed? Mr. Bauer,
yes.
Mr. Shagnon,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, moving right along, right next door, we have HPC DMO 2023.03. Address is 234 Pearl Street. Applicant is Burroughs Properties LLC. The owner is Stuart Pitchell, trustee of the 234 Pearl Street Realty Trust. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Our applicant back here.
Yes, we are. Attorney Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street in Somerville. I'm here with Tony Barros, the principal of Barros Properties LLC, and Marilyn Modinger of Runcible Studios, an architect with an historical preservation background. This is a significance hearing regarding 234 Pearl Street, which is a residential two-family structure. The structure is not unique or outstanding in any way and lacks significance. Per the staff report, the houses on this street were standard 2.5-story gable or roofed variety favored for cheap, quick construction. It was converted from 1 unit to 2 units. There were a host of alterations made over the years as listed on page 7 and 8 of the staff report, with extensions, a dormer, portico entrance, porch top balcony, rear lean-to addition, replacement doors and windows, concrete steps, shutters, asphalt shingles, siding, and trim, as you can see there in the photos. What you see is therefore not the original massing or integrity. Again, if we could ask Marilyn Modinger to walk through her report on the property. Marilyn?
Hi, everyone. Marilyn Modinger, back again. Architect in Cambridge. As Adam was mentioning, the massing has been significantly added to and altered over time. It's easy to see from the back in particular. There's a whole hodgepodge, we'll use that word again here, of things that are going on at the back. Sort of have the sort of litany of things that happen to these types of houses that degrade their historic significance. Vinyl replacement windows, vinyl doors, storm doors, and that kind of thing. All of the front porch trim has been, and railings have been replaced with vinyl, and those sort of half walls you can see there. I don't see any of the original sort of trim or cornice or any of that kind of stuff that might have been here originally. The siding is obviously also covered up with vinyl. Oftentimes that's done because the original wood or shakes are deteriorated beyond saving. So it appears that both the massing and the character of the house have been significantly altered, not to mention the fact that it's now a 2-family instead of a 1-family. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's Adam Dash again. Yeah, I've seen this house before all over the city. It's not a remarkable house whatsoever. It does not meet the criteria for significance as to persons, events, or history. And the public interest is to demolish this building and 236 Pearl Street. The owners of both of those properties are the same people, different companies, same people. To demolish this and 236 to build a structure more appropriate to the neighborhood and the park across the street, as opposed to keeping this structure, especially in light of 236 also coming down. Therefore, the applicant asks that the commission not find 234 Pearl Street significant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will mute myself again.
Okay. And if you all are through, then I will move us on to the public comment portion of this hearing. Any members of the public want to weigh in?
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. Ron Cavallo, you have been unmuted on our end, and I believe you are also unmuted on your end.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street, Somerville. I'm a 4th-generation resident of the city and a significant property owner, and our residency goes back to 1894, which I think is some sort of a record. I see the structure as completely unremarkable, and I see the loss of this structure as an important and significant economic improvement to the city. I remain very, very concerned that the small developers in this city have left the city. It's had a negative impact on the local economy, the local banks. I'm very concerned that condo conversions are basically down to zero. I'm very concerned about the revenue that the city generates through taxation. I'm very concerned about what I have described as overreaching by this commission in the past. I will admit I am pro-development. I'm pro-development for a number of reasons. Firstly, I see that, again, this building is completely unremarkable. I think there's an opportunity here to demolish this structure along with the adjacent structure and add value to the community. And I also want to add that I consider the city of Somerville to be the most anti-development city on the East Coast. And I remain very concerned about the city's systems, which are degrading, and an overall anti-development policy in this city. And this, what I think is almost an absurd desire to meet the 2050 goals, which is virtually impossible unless the housing and the structures in this city are upgraded, the majority of which are small properties. I'm very concerned about the city. I'm very concerned about the way the city is being run. I'm very concerned about the economics of this city. I fully support the demolition of both these structures. I fully support the development of this site, and I believe I have the best interests of the city of Somerville in my heart. This is a city that I used to love. I am losing my love for this city because of what I see going on in this city, which is essentially anti-business and anti-development. That's all I want to say.
Thanks.
Any other members of the public, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. Stephen Nutter, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself on your end to be able to speak.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, great, thank you. My name is Stephen Nutter. I'm at 24 Maple Avenue. just around the corner. I just would like to say that I support the demolition of this building and the previous one as well. I'm a member of the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association, but I'm not here representing them directly. But I will say that Gilman, this development is really integral to Gilman Square. It's one of the last areas to receive the development love that it deserves. It's a critical, important part. It's a new T-stop, so it's bringing in regional folks into the neighborhood, and there's a lot of opportunity here. This development will, even though we've tried on several other parcels, this development will be one of the first big developments in Gilman Square, and will set a standard for the future of the square. And I know that with this developer and the architect, they've been working in the square before, and I think that they'll bring something of value that we all really need. And so thank you for hearing me, and I fully support its demolition.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. Mr. Chairman, I do not see any other members of the public with their hands up. I'll do one more pass through the list. All right, there are no other members of the public with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
Okay, thanks. I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. Just a reminder for people, sometimes the distinction between this part of the demo delay process and the next is for a determination of significance. It's really focused purely on the architecture and on the site. I know that sometimes it feels like there's a blur between that and discussions of what's the highest and best use of the property and in kind of the broader picture of things, development potential and impact and neighboring stuff. But this, if those issues are floating around, those would really weigh in more in the public reserved hearing. At this level, it's just focused entirely on, does this building have merit? Is it worth exploring or not? So, with that, who wants to comment first on this?
Well, I'll go first again. I will share that I acknowledge all of the things shared by the applicant's attorney and architect, but I disagree. Ultimately, I do think that the property contributes to the feel of the neighborhood, that it is among a group of front gabled 2.5-story properties, regardless of their current use, be it single family, multifamily. But there's a collection of them right next door. This is a group of 4. There's a collection across the street. There are groups of them on the neighboring side streets, and the form and massing and this sort of very strong identifiable roof lines of these front gabled houses as a collection speaks to the era in which they were built. And so I do find that this property contributes to that sense of neighborhood and streetscape and the overall feel of the area. And so I believe this property does have historic significance, and I think it would be a loss for the city to see it demolished.
I sense a void here. I have mixed feelings on it. In this kind of the greater issue of what constitutes streetscape is always it's a blurry line. But the previous case, or a bunch of mansard cottages that were built all at once versus a gable. These are clearly, there's a 4 in a row, and they're opposed across the street by the same thing. A front gable house is not so uncommon in Somerville. Oh, so that in that sense, it's, you know, nothing remarkable, but on the flip side, it is a fairly uninterrupted pattern of those. But I looked at this and I walked by today and I kind of went back and forth. I could see why I would normally say this matters, the fact that there's this rhythm. They weren't built entirely the same. If you look at them carefully, some have bays, some have slightly different, you know, returned eaves, other ones don't. But the overall massing carries the same story. You know, that story is pretty ubiquitous throughout the city, but that story is part of that street nevertheless. So, you know, I didn't come out of that site visit with a really clear idea of how I felt about that. So I was curious what you all, you know, fun to have a little discussion about this. You, Mr. Bauer.
Yeah, so I agree with Vice Chair Kelly. I think that there's enough there in terms of the massing, the bulk of the fenestration, and the rhythm of the streetscape that that I think it is significant. It's true that these are common, but that characteristic is part of what makes them important to the city. Oddly, the things that are sort of one-offs are in that sense less important because they don't typify the city. These houses do.
I find myself like HR Parks torn on the question of significance on this one, but it's I'm still trying to hash my head around how I feel about whether it meets the threshold of significance. I think that there have been a number of good and interesting points raised about whether it be preferably preserved, but that's a different hearing. So I'm trying to wrap my mind just around the question of significance. And, you know, even then, it's, you know, yes, it's part of the row of, you know, 2.5-story gable end homes. It's also the end of the row, you know, how much is it contributing compared to everything else, especially given that across the street from it is all no longer that character, everything else, and it's I'm not strongly feeling the significance here personally. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, CJ. How about you, Mr. Falvey? What do you think on this?
Yeah, I think I'm probably more aligned with Mr. Chagon's observations, comments, point of view on the matter, you know, in the context of where the building stands and the neighborhood and what's going on with associated properties. You have a hard time looking at it as being truly, you know, significant, recognizing how many other 2-family properties are in the area that I think are perhaps more worthy of that designation. So I'm leaning against looking at this as being a significant, historically significant property.
That's an interesting point. One of you raised it being the last on a row of them. It has less relevance than if it were the middle one, if there were 5 in a row and the center one were in question. Although, I don't know. What do you think, Robin? What do you any follow-up thoughts on that?
I feel like I like the row of 4 more than I like a row of 3. You lose one, there's pressure, there's more pressure on the remaining 3, and we're going to lose them all. They stand as 4. They have a little more strength and presence.
Yeah, but my take on it is their strength and presence is looking like most other blocks in Somerville in a large way. I don't
That's
know.
not true.
Well, not exactly.
That's not true. I mean, they're, you know,
Yeah.
they're not punctuated by triple deckers. They don't have a 1960s brick, you know, apartment building between them. They're not, you know, gambrel roofs. They're not mansard. They're, you know, we have, you know, there's a lot of development at the time that these buildings were built, but these are distinctive and they do typify a very important time in the development of Somerville. So,
yeah. Fair.
Yeah, those are good points. And this neighborhood pattern comes up a lot, and it's always a little bit nuanced, because we've certainly voted for significance on structures purely because of the gable oriented, for this kind of reason in the past. We have plenty of precedent for doing that in this commission, and we've had a few cases where we haven't done that as well. So I don't think you can really say we're abiding, I mean, in the long history of my viewing of our commission. I don't know. You know, of course, we also mentioned if this were found significant at the next hearing when it comes to preferably preserved, that's a whole different kind of ballgame, because at that point we would kind of consider what's the end game for the property and all that. So I don't know, people ready to vote on this, or didn't want to hash it out anymore?
I move that we vote to find the property historically significant.
I second that.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Kelly for significance, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
I will vote aye as well on this for significance. And opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Have 3 and 2. We'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Aye.
Mr. Chagnon?
No.
Mr. Falvey?
No.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. And for findings, we will, well, Vice Chair Kelly, do you want to bring up the findings?
Sure, that the structure retains much of its original form as visible from the street, and contributes significantly to the rhythm of the streetscape.
Okay.
I would add that the form and massing of the building are substantially intact, even though the surface details have mostly been removed.
Motion on adopting those findings.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ryan and DJ, are you gonna, I can remember how we do this. Do you want to vote? Why do you want to vote on those findings?
Abstaining is the.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, but yeah, can we abstain?
Could certainly abstain.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Bauer?
Aye.
Mr. Chagnon?
Abstain.
Mr. Falvey?
Abstain.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. So, so we'll come back next month with a preferably preserved hearing for this particular project, or for this property. And just a reminder that when we vote for if it were to become preferably preserved, which is not, I'm just conjecting, it begins a period. It often doesn't stretch the entire 18 months. We usually come to, depends on how things work out with staff. If there's an agreement, we come to agreement on what would replace it, or memorialization or documentation, all sorts of things like that. So it's a fluid process. But at the moment, we're coming back next month for a Raffle Preserved hearing on this case.
Mr. Chair, it's Adam Dash. What is the date of that next meeting?
Mr. Chairman, through you, it is June 6th.
Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. We'll see you then.
The next case in our agenda is HPC DMO 2023.07. 325 Alewife Brook Parkway. Applicant is Robert DiPiero. Owner is William N. Doucette, trustee of the 325 Alewife Realty Trust. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum 75 years ago. We have an applicant here for this case.
Will the applicant please raise your hand and you will be unmuted? And Mr. Chairman, through you, if I may tell the commissioners, if you could please mute yourself if you are not speaking, because that's what creates the echo that you're hearing. All right, Robert DiPiero, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself on your side to be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. I'm the applicant, Robert DiPiero. I don't have a formal presentation for you tonight, but the detailed staff report tells us everything we need to know about this property from what I've read through. More than happy to answer any questions or anything that you guys got. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak about this case?
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. Ron Cavallo, you have been unmuted.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street, Somerville, Mass. I think it's almost an utter absurdity that this structure goes before this commission. I am fully in support of the demolition of this structure. And I want to restate that I believe this city is the most anti-development city in the state and probably in the East Coast. I think this commission has two functions. One is to preserve properties of significance. The other is essentially, from what I can see, to control most of the development in the city. And I'm disgusted, absolutely disgusted. I'm disgusted with the way the city is being run. I'm disgusted by the anti-development policies in this city. And I think the fact that there are almost zero condominium conversions and the fact that all the small developers have left the city are an indication of what the city has done to itself. I'm absolutely disgusted. But needless to say, I want to see the structure down. It's a benefit to the city. And I'm going to say it one more time. I am disgusted, absolutely disgusted by the way the city is being run. And I also want to state that this city has more affordable units per capita.
Ron Cavallo, 1 second. Please limit your comments to the actual building itself.
Absolutely. I will not have my First Amendment rights be violated.
I'm going to ask that you be turned off if you can't keep it on topic here. Okay, this is not a free-for-all. You can just rant about anything that annoys you. This project.
It is not about being annoyed, mister. It is about being upset by the way the city is run.
Just turn them off.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other members of the public who would like to actually speak about this case?
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment regarding this building. All right, Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone else with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
Okay, I close the public comment portion of this case. And who wants to weigh in first on this?
So I'm happy to go first, and I think this is another one where I'm willing to let it go.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the sort of jaunty little roof line on the right side and the fenestration pattern on that section are interesting, but I don't think that that constitutes enough it doesn't have historic significance. I don't think it has enough merit.
Yeah, thanks. I actually went out there today, and I had the same thing. I really wanted to find something to latch onto there, and that little angled plane, and I saw the old Esso name, but there's just so little remaining of that character. The original storefront's been kind of covered up in wood and most of it. So I found it lacking in significance that way.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, it's a far cry from the really charming gas stations from the 1920s that preceded it. This got to the point where they were like, oh, nobody really cares, just build them functional to some extent. Somebody put in a little effort here, but there's not much left of it.
I support the comments that have been made.
I move that we vote to find the property historically significant. A yes vote would indicate that it is historically significant. A no vote would indicate it is not.
A second.
All in favor of the motion proposed by Vice Chair Kelly, say aye. Opposed?
Nay.
No.
No.
And we'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer,
Nay.
Mr. Chagnon,
Nay.
Mr. Falvey,
No.
Vice Chair Kelly,
No.
I'll vote no. And for findings, I think we could just simply say it lacks sufficient amount of its original integrity. It doesn't contribute to the streetscape around it in any historical context, not associated with any important person or pattern in rural history.
I move that we adopt those findings.
I'll second that.
All in favor of the motion forwarded by by Vice Chair Kelly, say yes. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Chagnon,
Yes.
Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you, applicant. And we have one remaining case tonight, which is a determination of preferably preserved status. This is the second step in the demo delay process we described this evening. And this is HPC DMO 2022.49, 80 Professors Row. The applicant is Kappa chapter of the Zeta Psi Corporation. The owner is the same as the applicant. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed almost 75 years ago. Is the applicant here tonight?
Anne Vigorito, you have been unmuted on our end.
Thank you, Wendy. Good evening once again, Chairman Parks, member of the Historical Commission, Attorney Ann Vigorito from 424 Broadway, Somerville. We were last before you on a determination of significance for this property at 80 Professors Row. So we are here to discuss the preferably preserved component. I have submitted to staff some items. One of which is a report by Carmine Gucciarino, who is on this evening, a structural engineer from Room and Gucciarino. You do have that. It is dated February 13th of this year to Mr. Robert Baer of the Kappa chapter of the Zeta Pi Corporation. You also do have the resume from Mr. Gucciarino, which lists his attributes that we'd find him to be an expert in this field. We've also submitted previously, and we resubmitted, the city of Somerville has posted on the building a danger, unsafe for use or occupancy post, and that was from December of 22. It still is there because the building has been deemed dangerous by the Inspectional Services Division. So that being said, I would, enter the report, and I would ask that Mr. Gucciarino be unmuted so that he can discuss the findings of his report. Since it's his report, he should testify to it, not I, as the attorney. So I would respectfully request that he be unmuted and speak on that at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you, this report was sent to the commissioners in advance of the last meeting, so you do have it. If you would like me to resend it to you, I can resend it to you now. Carmine Gucciarino, you are unmuted. On our end, you will need to unmute yourself.
Good evening, Chairman Parks, members of the Historic Commission. Carmine Guaracino from Roman Guaracino Structural Engineers. I present to you this report that I prepared for my client on behalf of my client, Mr. Robert Bear of the Zeta Psi Corporation, regarding 80 Professors Row in Somerville. The structure, in my summary, in my opinion, has outlived its useful life. A lot of evidence of movement, cracks. Not all the finishes were removed, but everywhere where I was able to see throughout the building, there was evidence of disrepair, cracked joists that were deflecting. In the basement area, the foundations have shifted, some movement, mortar that's deteriorating, some rotting sills. And when you look at the overall structure, it has a nice stature, the structure, but certainly there's some evidence of some movement and leaning, which concerns me, especially given that Massachusetts, we're definitely under a high wind zone and hurricane area, with winds that could reach 110, 120 miles per hour. So those are kind of the causes of my concern for the structure.
Okay. Well, thank you. Is there anything else? Attorney Vigorito, or is anybody else who wants to speak from your group?
No, not at this time, Chairman Parks. I mean, I would just like to further point out relative to Mr. Gucciarino's report that he feels that the only thing that can be done is to raise the entire building. That would be the best way to handle it. The property is, as he stated, is in disrepair, and there's nothing that could be done that would make this a viable structure. So we would respectfully request that you do not find the property to be perfectly preserved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I put a few questions to the structural engineer?
I'm still on, yes.
Okay, good, thank you. So do you think that this building is repairable? I'm not asking you to make a judgment about whether it's a good idea. I'm asking whether you think it is repairable.
I do not, without significant replacement.
But with significant replacement, you think that it is repairable?
I understand where you're getting at, and I totally appreciate that. You could repair almost anything, but when you have to replace more than 60, 70% of a structure and the foundations are no longer valid, to me, it's really not repairable. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, so if that's it from the applicant, then we would next switch to the public hearing part of this case. Any members of the public want to speak about this building? Now's your time.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. Carmen Gutrino, may I ask for you to mute yourself during this period? Your mic is still on.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Ron Cavallo, you are unmuted on our end.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street. This is a complex situation, and this sort of thing comes up a lot, where the structure is deemed as potentially unsafe or in need of a complete rebuilding. However, this is the sort of building that I think this commission should be restoring and maintaining or preserving. This is the sort of building, not some of what I've seen that has been preserved in this city. So I consider this a very complex situation. What does one do with a building that's quite nice and has architectural merit, but is essentially in such disrepair that it probably can't be saved? I don't know what the answer is. I just know that this is the type of structure that I think should be preserved if possible. But I've also, as a very experienced developer, have dealt with buildings of this kind, and they are essentially so problematic that trying to save them is incredibly difficult. However, you know, this is a very pretty building in a beautiful section of the city. It sits beautifully on the lot, but it sounds, and I believe the engineer sounds structurally unsound. So all I can say about this is that from an architectural perspective, it's the sort of thing that this city should be preserving, and that the overreaching that I've seen upsets me, as I've made clear. But I truly think this is a very pretty building, but I am worried about the economics of it. How does one save such a structure? I don't have answers. I just know that I believe the structural engineer, and I think this is a real complex problem. I would hate to see it come down, but at the same time, I believe the engineer, and I believe it's at the point where it probably can't be saved. And I've seen buildings like this that when one looks at them superficially, they look fine, but you know, there are foundation issues, there's shifting issues, there's all kinds of structural issues. And buildings do reach their useful life. And it seems like this one may have.
Chair Parks?
It's beautiful.
We are way beyond the 2-minute limit.
Oh, okay. Wrap up. Is that it, Ron?
That is it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, any other members of the public want to speak here?
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. Rocco DiRico, you are unmuted on our end, but you are still muted on yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners, for allowing me the opportunity to speak here. Just wanted to let you know that Tufts University opposes the demolition permit request for this property. We have been negotiating in good faith with the owners of 80 Professors Row, and there are numerous restrictions on the property's deed. This include a use restriction, a right of first offer, and a right to purchase. In all 3 restrictions, Tufts has the ability to act on these restrictions at any time it sees fit. This property is centrally located right in the middle of our historic Medford Somerville campus. In the past few years, Tufts has acquired similar properties on Professors Row and preserved them all. Today, there are only 3 privately owned fraternities left on campus. This one being one of them, and Tufts does intend to purchase this property. And we are currently under the process of getting the property appraised so we can make a fair and just offer on the property. It's our goal, and I believe it's the city of Somerville's goal, to use this property to house more undergraduate students on campus. That is what we've done with other similar properties on Professors Row and on the Somerville side of our campus. Furthermore, this property is surrounded on all 4 sides by Tufts University, so granting a demolition permit to a project without seeing what they intend to do with the property after demolition, I think would be irresponsible. We have yet to see any plans or any proposals for what will be done to the site after it's demolished. And with the fact that we're in the process of purchasing the property, we ask that you not issue a demolition permit for this property to allow us time to negotiate with the owners and purchase the property outright. Thank you very much for letting me speak this evening.
Thank you.
If there are any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you'll be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. All right, Mr. Chairman, there are no other members of the public with their hands up. You may close the public comment.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion of this case, the hearing for this case, and we can take it up. A couple of things I'd point out. I believe the applicant has owned this building for over 100 years. Is that correct? I think I saw in your staff report they acquired it in 1919 or something like that.
That is correct. This is Attorney Vigorito.
Okay. And just, I mean, that this any problems that the building has had, if there's any neglect involved, or it's kind of happened under someone's watch, this applicant's watch for 100 years. So it's not like a brand new situation that just suddenly popped up. And with respect to the engineer's report, which I do respect their expertise and all that, but it's, as an architect, I know that it's not really a binary thing. Anybody with enough motivation can save anything, really, unless it's burned. So it's ultimately sort of a judgment call as to when something ought to be torn down. It might make more financial sense to do that, or it might be that they can, for the same price, tear it down and build a new thing with the proper insulation on that versus sistering all the things and doing some foundation repair and all that. So to me, I would weigh the work involved with structural repairs with the importance of the building, the merits. And in this particular case, I think this building has such a prominent location, such an important role in the street there, Professors Row. It's got a long history with Tufts, and with that kind of the architecture, it's got a commanding presence. I think it's a high hurdle for me to go over to say it ought to be ripped down because it's going to cost someone a bunch of money to fix it. It happened under this applicant's watch. Yes, it might need a lot of work. Maybe it's brought on by a change of use or reconfiguring over 50% of the floor area or something like that. I'm not really swayed so much by that angle there. I think this building is very important. I sort of jumped the gun, but those are my thoughts. Who else wants to comment?
I agree with everything said, and it is concerning to me that the people who are asking to tear the property down are the ones who've neglected it and allowed it to get to the state that it's in. And the structural report is, not clear enough on where exactly in the building, this is a large structure, where exactly it's having problems. It seems, likely that there are areas that are worse off than others. The photographs that we've received where we just see floor joists looking through to a level below, it would lead us to believe that it's the front original portion, but it's not. It's the rear portion that was added later. I'd be fine getting rid of the rear addition if we can help save the original portion of the house. But yeah, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way, and this is historically significant and needs to be cared for in an appropriate manner, which it has not been.
I'd say my 2 cents on the matter is, frankly, with all due deference to Mr. Guaracino's experience and the research that's been done, I mean, he's absolutely right that it's in terrible shape. As others have said, we know who let it get there. But that aside, what strikes me is that our determination is on preferably preserved, not practically preserved. And that, if there's no practical way to do it, then that'll come out in the memorandum of agreement process that happens after this. And whatever happens, I think that it's very clear to me that this would be preferably preserved if there's a way that it can do it. And as the gentleman from Tufts stated, they are in efforts to try to preserve the property. So it feels to me like, at least until that process is played out, there's the potential that it could be preserved. So on the question of preferably preserved, I come down very firmly on, yeah, it'd be better to have it than not for the city and for its history and its fabric and for the integrity of Tufts campus and the streetscape and the position on the lot. Whether it'll end up being preserved, I don't know. But in terms of preferably, my feeling is pretty clear.
So I would agree with what all of my colleagues have said here, including that the test for us is preferable on preservation. Note that Mr. Guaracino's report does not say that it's not repairable. And he told us tonight that it was repairable, simply that it was his judgment that that would not be a wise decision. But that's not the question that is in front of us. And as to the wisdom of preserving it, that's really a question of whoever acquires it next. And Tufts has told us that they intend to acquire it and they intend to repair it. So if they're the ones willing to assume those costs and obligations, I think that makes it an even easier decision, because we now know that it not only is preferably preserved, but in fact, we can expect that it will be preserved.
This is Attorney Vigorito. I do need to chime in relative to Mr. D'Amico's public commenting. What he stated was not factually true. The applicant, Bob Baer, who's with us this evening, can speak to that relative to there is no sale going on with Tufts University. That is factually untrue. And if you'd allow Mr. Baer to explain that, he would appreciate that, because we don't want inappropriate facts presented to the Historical Preservation Commission. Thank you.
Sure, I think it's fair that we let Mr. Baer speak about that subject.
Bob Baer, you have been unmuted on our end. You are still muted on your end.
Hello, hello everyone. Thank you very much. I've been listening with great interest in this. Obviously, I am the treasurer of the fraternity, the Alumni Association, the fraternity. I was not a member of that fraternity. I was a member of the Lafayette chapter of that fraternity, and I came in about 5 years ago to help with different processes, and it's a long story. But with regard to we were in discussions with Tufts to try to work out a deal with them, and basically we haven't reached an agreement. And we have always told Tufts that our intention is to do student housing on that lot. And I think the gentleman has been in meetings where I've been in the meetings, and he knows that's our intention. But we truly believe that it's not salvageable. We'd like to do a student housing project there. We are still, we are in discussions with other people for student housing projects. And Tufts basically saying that they won't allow a third-party developer on our private property. And that's basically, we want to work with Somerville. We want to do whatever we can to try to make this a proper succession to what the fraternity was there. And our goal was to put up student housing with club concepts so that there could be, the Tufts has a deficit of student housing with a club component, and that was our proposal to Tufts. So I have sat through a few meetings here and had things said that, were not true about us and what our proposal is. And I just think that since this is the end of this process, I thought it was important for me to step up and speak and say, we are open to whatever we can do to make this a benefit to the school and also the community with community space, but we don't think that this building can be saved. And again, I thank you for your service to Somerville, and I'm open to talk with anyone and talk about our plans. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I would just like to note that the commission tonight, whatever the findings that they make, will need to be, cannot take into consideration any sales or any of the ongoing issues between Tufts and the fraternity. It really needs to be based on the building and the allotted findings in the code, and what, the loss of the structure versus what can be built there. But the sale, things like that, whether or not it's an unsafe structure, none of that can be taken into consideration into your vote.
Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, well, has everybody weighed in? Mr. Falvey, have you had any thoughts?
No, I really don't have anything to add beyond what my articulate colleagues have shared. I'm fine with what I've heard and concur with the viewpoints.
I mean, I think this back and forth between the applicant and Tufts is, it'd be nice if the building, if somehow this thing's resolved, but as F said, that's really outside of what we're here to discuss tonight. And my opinion on this remains that this building is ought to be preserved, and I recognize that preserving this might require a bit more effort than some projects, but I think in this case, the building is important enough that that remains my position.
I agree, and I would move that we vote to find the property preferably preserved.
I second that.
Preserves motion put forward by Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon?
Yes.
Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. And for findings, I think there are a variety of things. We could mention that it retains its historic integrity. It is a valuable asset to its streetscape, its collection of housing of similar time frame. I think it has an association that it's been part of the fraternity house for 100 years. I think that's of interest. I don't know if that would raise to the level of being importantly associated with an important person or not, but I think that would factor into the findings. Just not a very common situation. What am I missing? Anything?
I think it's also importantly associated with Tufts University as a whole.
Oh, right. Yep. And Professors Row happens to have a essentially unique position that way within Somerville, that it's a street that goes back to the beginning of the university, which is a big part of the city, shared with Medford, of course. So, okay. So my findings to me.
I move that we vote to adopt those findings.
I'll second that.
Put forward by Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Chagnon. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So thank you all. And I think that is our last case, which brings us to other business, which is the February 7th minutes and the CPC update. I confess I've not read the February 7th minutes yet, so I'm going to take a quick peek.
I need to step away for a moment, but I'll be back in a few. So if I missed the meeting minutes vote, go on without me. Didn't notice anything in them that jumped out at
Let's see them. Okay, it was a pretty quick meeting. Anybody have any comments on these minutes?
I do not. I vote that we, or I move that we vote to adopt the meeting minutes for February 7th. Or what was, yeah, February 7th.
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do a roll call of Mr. Bauer.
I abstain. I was not present for that meeting.
Okay. Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
I'll vote yes, which is 4 people, right? Okay, so we're good.
Is it 4? It's 3 of us.
Well, the 4 people present, 4 people voted even.
Oh,
the
gotta
vote
go.
was to abstain. And DJ is now back. He was
I'm
gone.
back.
He was gone for a short period of time. It was only a matter of minutes.
But well done.
Pretty sure that was jokes like that were covered in our revised code of conduct that came out.
No dad jokes. Yeah.
Speaking of the code of conduct, since we're pretty much done except for the CPC update, are we needing to do anything on that? We have to sign a form, right? Return it to you?
Yes, you'll need to sign a form and return it to me. And if you have any questions or issues, you can let me know and I will put you in contact with someone from the mayor's office so you can discuss it.
Was that form in that? I think that was one of the emails you sent out or somebody from the city.
Yes, it was an email I sent you and I can resend it to anyone who needs it.
Wendy, do we need to actually adopt the code of conduct?
Let me double check right now because if we do, I can put on the June 6th meeting.
Yeah, there was some language about that, wasn't there? About
The
committees need to
meeting,
conduct.
actually, that's what it sounded like, but it sounded like it was sort of a work in progress and they hadn't originally intended that. Now they thought it did have to happen. So if you could check on.
Yes, so I was able to find the answer to that. No, you don't need to adopt anything. You just need to sign the form and return it to me.
Give us on the commission. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, we'll do.
Okay.
Did the final
the-
version of that after Mr. Bauer's edits end up getting emailed out? I'm trying to remember. I may have missed it in the flurry of emails when I was away.
That was not the code of conduct. That was
Oh.
our rules. So I sent my comments to Sarah. I'm not sure.
Right, the code of conduct. Yep, never mind.
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
That
through
one I
you.
already covered. That's all.
The
That's all.
policy, rules of policy and procedure,
Right.
we're looking at that and also just going through all of Mr. Bauer's comments and just going through the document. It should be on the June 6th meeting.
Okay, I got those two mixed up in my head. I recall the code of conduct now, and that was all wonderfully stuff I support anyway.
I remember, I think I was at the hearing that you were, Dick, and you were raising questions of like, how is this voluntary if it's required? Was that you that was asking questions to that effect? Like that,
Yes.
where it's sort of, yeah, semantics was coming into play there.
And while we're
I'm gonna,
this, we have elections at our next meeting, right? Is that on the agenda yet for our next meeting?
Not yet. I believe it is next month, and we are also going to revisit whether or not to continue the 2 meetings a month as well.
So the elections, I think,
Because
are
there was
supposed to,
the request.
so I think the elections are supposed to be in May. I think that's. what the
Yes,
order-
we were supposed to have a May 16th meeting, but after this one had already gone out, we realized there is not going to be a May 16th meeting as no applicants got in a complete application in time for that meeting.
Okay. So we're off the hook then.
For another month.
and regarding the CPC update, I attended my first official CPC meeting as a member this time. And there's definitely a learning curve in that, the processes involved, but what's to say? It looks like, and feel free to correct me, Dick, if I'm mistaken, but it looks like very soon. I was surprised to find that the percentage cut that each of the 3 categories gets is set before we know who's going to apply for what. So it's sort of like it has to get massaged within a framework that's predetermined.
Yes, that's the basic design of the CPC. Is it requires each committee to adopt a plan for the year that includes those allocations, and then what actually happens during the year based on applications follows from that. A lot of committees therefore make a decision to maximize their flexibility by only allocating the minimum amount in each of the 3 categories. I'm probably speaking in shorthand for everybody else, so let me back up slightly. So the state statute requires that each committee put at least 10% into the 3 categories: historic preservation, recreation, open space, and affordable housing. And so some committee, and then the remaining 70% can be spent however the committee wants to do it. In Somerville, we have always pre-allocated the bulk of the money at the beginning of the year. So we've said 50% will go to affordable housing, 15% for historic preservation, 20% for open space and recreation, 5% for administration, and then the remainder, which if I did my math right, is 10%, then can be spent in any of those substantive categories. We could decide, and we now doesn't include me, it now includes Eric. We could decide next, I meant the city, could decide next year to reduce those prior allocations and leave more in the flexible category. And in fact, in the early years of the CPC, we had a bit more. So it was 45% affordable housing, 15% historic preservation, 15% open space and recreation. So that left 20% in this undesignated, meaning it can be spent in across any of those three categories. And then probably 5 years in, we decided we should make a bigger commitment to affordable housing and to open space, since those were in general sort of the priorities that the city, people of the city indicated. And that's where the current percentages are. But it does mean that you decided at the beginning of the year, and then you have to figure out how to make things work later in the year. So it could be, Eric, next year you'll want to push for reducing some of those percentages and leaving more of it undesignated. Although I must say it is not, it does reflect policy decisions. And since the affordable housing at the beginning of the year just gets turned over to the trust fund, it's really the same decision. It's just, here's how much money is going to go to the affordable trust fund. And it, in fact, has worked out. It's not like historic preservation, I think, has gotten shortchanged. There's almost always some money left over. The CPC is holding on to close to $1 million in funds from previous years that didn't get spent, and they didn't get spent again this year. And yet, I think in general, the committee felt like the priorities got met.
Okay, that was my only concern, is what if we have $10 million of historic projects and 100,000 of, just to be a little bit hyperbolic there. But it sounds like that hasn't really been the situation.
It mostly hasn't. It could, and sort of the one time that in effect happened was on the West Somerville Branch Library, and it got dealt with by bonding.
I'll be glad to know, Roberta, much like our commission, the CPC also has a great staff person taking care of. She was loaded with data. One of the things I was depressed and surprised to see is the city values historic preservation the least of all. They did poll, the numbers, the percentages kind of sort of mirror the polling that they did. Admittedly, the polling was sort of a slim snapshot of Somerville at just certain locations, but those percentages as outlined by Dick kind of match what the polling they were able to do with the interest in the city, how they would want to see these allocated. Interestingly, though, they seem to value the results of our work more than other things, like the high profile, the library, and things that people really, really valued were kind of the preservation angles. So our work is not for nothing. So anyway, this was, I don't think there's a whole lot else to really report about my trip to the meeting, my field trip.
Eric, since one of the things we had talked about a month or so ago at some length was the Adams Magoon House, since the CPC had asked us our opinion about it. Maybe you can tell people how that ended up shaking out.
Well, didn't we, has it changed? I thought it was the same. So the thing there that was giving people trouble is that it's using public money to fund a private project, which, other than the small amount we dole out for windows, it's kind of a unique one there. And so the discussion was how to get that back, because what if they turn around and sell it next year? It's not right that they would reap the benefits of what we just gave them. So the discussion of how long to have a clawback in the appropriation, that if they sell it, and what do we end up going with? 50 years?
My recollection is 50 years.
50 years. So if the property is sold within 50 years, the money that was given to them for this work would come back to the city. And I think there was an exception, so that if it gets passed to a family member, it's not considered a sale, if I remember that correctly. It's inherited. And so that was an interesting one, but I think that's happening, and the Adams Magoon House is a great structure, as we know. Glad to see that. My notes, anything else? Oh, one thing that came up, I think this got emailed to Sarah, the Grace Baptist Church. Somebody in the committee was concerned that we hadn't seen, want to make sure that we were aware that there was a fence going along the right side there between it and the abutting property, and whether that was to our, something we agreed to. And I couldn't remember from the specific hearing when we reviewed that, because it's been a year or two. She thought that maybe it was a switch and that the fence was higher than we would have expected and blocking the view of the church. So I think that Roberta emailed Sarah White about that to confirm whether that design as they have it has been approved. So I don't know if you're part of that process too, Wendy.
I am not, but I can definitely follow up with Sarah White tomorrow and make sure that we have an answer for that.
I think it probably was okayed by us because I have a vague recollection. Maybe you remember that, Dick. Were you there at that meeting when we reviewed that?
I was not. I don't remember that.
Anyway, that was my day at the CPC. Anything else? Oh, I saw your list of staff approvals, Wendy. Thank you. We had some window replacements in there. Did we authorize? What did we authorize for staff approval of window replacements? Or were those ones where they weren't visible?
So some of them were not visible from any right of way. Other ones, because I made sure to go through them today, so I was pretty sure this was going to be a question. We are allowed to, at staff level, approve in-kind window replacements if the windows being replaced are not the original windows or windows that have been there long enough to accrue historic significance. So they were all replacement or like recent replacement windows that were being switched out in kind. And we do have the ability to, if a certain set of windows for that sort of situation, never original windows and never historically significant windows, if windows are not being replaced in kind and they're not original and they've been approved for a portion of a building, we can have at staff level, because it's considered a commission approval for that building, to extend that for the rest of the building. So for the Central Street properties, I believe one of those window replacements was visible, but you had said okay previously to other windows being replaced at a certain type along those blocks of buildings. So we were able to approve that at staff level. And it was the exact same approval, this exact same windows going in, just in a different window.
Okay. Yes.
Question regarding 28 Warren Avenue. I see that they received approval for repair of a bay.
Yes.
Was there any discussion of roof work?
On the actual roof of the entire building, no. So there's repair of the bay, and the entirety of the bay. I know that they are shoring up, and that includes part of the roofing for that bay. But everything was supposed to be in-kind repair work.
And the bay is the bump out over the front entrance or something different?
It is the one on the front entrance. Let me pull it up and make sure.
I need to step away again, but I'll be back. Or if we've adjourned, I won't.
Are we done?
We're close. We're so close.
So it's one of the bays on the front next to that opening, the porch in the middle. It's one of the ones on the side.
Okay, because they've done work on the structure over the front porch.
I will go ahead and go through all of our previous approvals and see if we've said yes to anything else. And if not, I have their emails, so I can go ahead and contact them and also contact ISD.
Because that has not previously been on any of the lists that have been shared with us. So just wondering.
Thank you for letting us know. I'll make sure to check in and also let you know what happens with that.
Thank you.
The general subject, and maybe it's just not something we should bring up now, you could let me know. As a policy for when we allow ourselves to mute a belligerent person, not speaking to anybody in particular, do we need to come to any consensus as to whether that's an okay thing to do under certain circumstances, or discuss that? I mean, we've had a code of ethics that was given to us, but I feel like we should be enforcing that among our spectators as well.
So there's actually a recent SJC decision on this, in which a town shut down somebody who was testifying at a public hearing in pretty inflammatory language, and the Supreme Judicial Court ruled that that was a violation of the person's First Amendment rights. That First Amendment doesn't mean people can say anything about anything. And I think that limiting people to stuff that's germane is within our discretion. But limiting people sort of because their language is inflammatory or would violate a code of conduct, I think at this point is pretty clearly not constitutional. People have a First Amendment right to say outrageous and inflammatory things. So what I would actually ask, Wendy, would be for you to talk to the city solicitor's office and give us some guidance from them. Probably other committees and commissions may need that as well. But it'd be good to have some guidance from them in light of the SJC's decision about how we should handle these kinds of things.
I will make sure to follow up with them. I believe that has been discussions on coming up with rules of conduct also in all of our policies and procedures as well.
Right, but I want to note that we can't hold people who are speaking at hearings to the kinds of conduct that we can hold ourselves to.
Yes, I will make sure to check with them. I do know that you have the ability to keep everyone to 2-minute public comments, and also if anyone is disrupting a meeting, you can also mute them. You have that ability. So it just is, as of now, I know that disruption of a meeting is a problem. However, I will make sure that we talk with the city solicitor and get back to you.
Yeah, if they want, they have a recording. I mean, I'm just curious if we're on the right foot there. Just, you know, I won't editorialize anymore.
So I have a question, and this may be something that's better discussed when Sarah is also available, but there have been a couple properties that I have brought to the attention of staff that I've seen through my real estate, just watching things coming to market and being in different neighborhoods and seeing projects going on. And there are a couple that have come to light recently that seem to have skirted our group because the plans suggested that the alterations being done to the property would constitute less than a 50% change, where in one instance at least, in the Duck Village neighborhood, the original structure is now completely obscured. They have altered, it was a gable front, it's now a mansard. It's, so it's a larger, the massing and form has changed. There's nothing original in terms of the fenestration or anything like that. So it's now been completely consumed by what appears to be a new structure, but apparently there's more than 50% of the original framing. And so just what we need to do to sort of understand how to prevent properties from being lost by very shrewd application of the demolition ordinance by skilled architects who design things to 48% demolition, but in all intents and purposes, the building is gone. And so I don't know if there's anything that we can do, but I'm just putting that out there that we're losing a bunch of properties to major alterations that effectively destroy them.
That
Mr.
would be an
Chairman,
interesting, oh, yes.
through you, to Vice Chair Kelly's point, we are having, we started a series of discussions with ISD on how to address this, because the issue is, as long as it's below the 48% per code, there's nothing we can really do. Most of the buildings, what's happening with them is that it's under 48% on the plans, and then once they get in the field, they end up demoing vastly more than that. So discussions on how we can coordinate with ISD to have more people, have their inspectors be out there at additional times to continue checking the work. How do we get, make sure that doesn't happen? Because the issue is there's not too many more protections we can take as long as it's showing under 48%. The one in Duck Village that you are specifically referencing, that one's a far trickier case because as of now, the exteriors are up, and according to ISD and by code is technically there. So that might be a strengthening of the ordinance in the conversation, like the way it's worded, and being a little bit more specific, which is also a conversation that we've started with ISD, and we're also going to try to set up meetings to sort of discuss what are those options, what works for them, because they are the enforcers, are the ones who are reviewing those plans before, you know, we only see them after they've either been too far gone or there's a problem or they hit that 50%. So we need to find languages that ISD is also comfortable with, that they can flag when looking at permits. So we are discussing it. We have made sure ISD is aware that we have major problems with this, and that is an ongoing issue, and they are being rather responsive right now, actually. So we are working on it. I know that doesn't help in the short term, but we're trying really hard to come up with a long-term plan.
Great. Thank you for that update. And one question is, when it's, you know, if there is a situation in which ISD discovers that someone has, you know, on a plan said, oh, we're only demolishing, you know, 46%, and then they go and it's, you know, significant, it's more than that. What are the ramifications? What is it that ISD can have the property owner do? Are there fines? Can they make them unbuild whatever they built or restore whatever they demolished?
So far what it's been is mostly a stop work order and stopping the process. ISD has the ability to put a stop work order as for 4 years, up to 4 years, as essentially a penalty for that work. That has also been in discussions on enforcing that and going forward, and what merits that, what doesn't merit that, things like that.
The challenge with that is that you know, certainly that's something that a developer wouldn't want to have happen. They don't want to, you know, be carrying a property for that amount of time, just idle. But that's crummy for the neighbors. That's really awful. You know, it's worse for the neighbors in some ways than it is for that developer property owner. And so, you know, I don't know whether it's possible to think about other ways that, you know, if there are things that could be achieved that are holding the responsible party responsible without creating negative effects for others. So not having kind of collateral negative effects for the neighborhood where they have to, you know, live next to a construction project that's halted and appears blighted, you know, because we had that on Sanborn here off of Warren Avenue where I don't know that they were stopped, but they just didn't do anything for years. And, you know, it was really hard for those neighbors to be living next to a boarded up, you know, chain link fence at the sidewalk, blocking off the property, you know, kind of property. It's an eyesore. Certainly doesn't help with rat situations. So all that.
Mr. Chairman, through you. So in all honesty, we are having these continued conversations and those points are being brought up. We are government, so we're moving slowly because these are, you know, fighting times for these meetings, but they are ongoing and happening. So I will bring up that particular perspective because I think that is true. And I think that would be interesting to also come in with solutions from that perspective.
Thank you.
It'd be kind of interesting to collect a list of all properties that have kind of pushed that limit, and we could do a postmortem at some point and see if there's any tightening up of the ordinance that would be warranted, like require a certain amount of the roof to remain, or more than just total volume.
And I think it would also be helpful, sorry to interrupt, Dick, but I think it would also be really helpful to understand who the parties involved are and whether there are repeat offenders at sort of any component of the project, so that when their projects come for approval and permitting, that they get extra special attention and oversight.
I was going to list as a poster child for the stuff we've been talking about, building that sat half demolished for years and years at the corner of Pearl and Florence, where Symphony Park is now. The owner basically demolished part of it without permit, and it got stopped and left. And in the meantime, it just fell apart, and eventually it was beyond saving and got demolished. It was unfortunately sort of a total failure on our part of saying to him, we're not going to let you to do anything with this, given the way you've treated the property, because it just meant that ultimately we couldn't save it. In the meantime, the neighbors, as you said, sat there with this deteriorating building for years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we become the bad guy when we're forcing a neighborhood to stare at a half-built building for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't help the city achieve anything in terms of any of its objectives. You know, it's kind of, yeah, it's just not an effective means of reprimanding a scofflaw developer. So.
If you look in Google Street View, you can look at the August 2007 picture, and you can see what the house looked like just sitting there falling apart. And you can see that the house was basically in good condition and an important house in an important location. But what we did ultimately was totally ineffective to save it.
Yeah.
There's a house, I guess I won't deliberate it, but on Quincy Street, we approved demolition in extreme pressure because the neighborhood was suffering from this dilapidated building. That was 2.5 years ago. I think it's still there. It's just falling down, this Tyvek blowing in the wind. And
yeah,
that's not sort of a different situation because we okayed that one to get taken down.
In fact, we got played on it because
there was a lot of pressure. How dare you make us live?
You know, we'll agree this building should not be coming down, but we'll agree, we'll let it come down. And having gotten permission, they still didn't do anything with it.
Okay. I just sent you, Wendy, an email of the picture from 1954 of the back side of Pearl Street. It's just kind of fun. It's the buildings that we just looked at. It was on a local Facebook group where people share old photos of the city, and it was kind of germane.
It is amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
It just popped in my head when I was at the hearing, like I should have shared that with you before. I forgot about it. Anyway. Anything else people want to hash out here?
So Wendy, let me just mention, I mentioned an SJC case, which was decided last month. I should give you the name and the citation. It's, although I'm sure the city solicitor will know it. It's a case called Barron versus Kolenda, Kolenda, and the citation is 491 Massachusetts 408.
Perfect.
It starts on page 408 of volume 491 of the SJC report. And it deals with this issue. And I'll read you a little bit of the language, but it doesn't answer the question that I had raised before. Here's what the court says. Although civility, of course, is to be encouraged, it cannot be required regarding the content of what may be said in a public comment session of a governmental meeting without violating both provisions of the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, which means the state constitution, which provide for robust protection of public criticism of governmental action and officials. What can be required is that the public comment session be conducted in an orderly and peaceable manner, including designating when public comment shall be allowed in the governmental meeting, the time limits for each person speaking, and the rules preventing speakers from disrupting others and removing those speakers if they do. So that sort of gives the parameters of it. What it doesn't say here, and that I think we particularly need some guidance on, is how to handle comments that we think are not germane. Can we stop those? I think we have to give people the benefit of the doubt about it. If somebody wants to say that they're disgusted, we can't object to that language. If somebody wants to say that they're disgusted with us about denying demolition permits, we can't, I think, stop that. If the comment ends up being not about us and not about the decision, but arguably about something else, where is the line? And it'd be good if we could get some guidance.
Yes, I will talk with the city solicitor. Well, we'll contact with the city solicitor this week and hopefully have an answer for you before the next meeting.
Good, thanks.
This was never an issue up till a year or two ago. Maybe it was. Am I forgetting anything, Dick? Did we ever have? We must have had some people way back, or Ryan, way back in the 20 years ago, whenever I first signed up.
I don't remember much. I remember people talking at great length, which is why I'm glad we have this time limit on it.
I remember meetings in the third floor of City Hall going on to about 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
Very hot and.
Yeah.
That was its own
We're all
form of
younger.
punishment, I guess, but yeah. No, I think people have just become, they're more comfortable being vocal and nasty. I just, remember when we had that case of that church up on the Masonic Temple or whatever, if you remember some of the comments that were lodged against the commission being white supremacists and stuff like that as an extension because supporting, I mean, people I think are more comfortable nowadays just kind of taking positions like that and putting it out there. And it's a world we live in, it's unfortunate, I think, in some respects, but.
Okay. Well, if we could talk about that with the.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
If we could hash that out, it'd be good. So in the future, going forward, we'll know if we just let them rant for 2 minutes and then be done with it.
Yeah, my suggestion probably as a general matter is that no matter how inappropriate we think it is, given that we have a 2-minute time limit, probably better to just let the time run and stop people rather than get into decisions about whether it's crossed a line that we can set up or risks crossing a line that we can't set up.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no other business, I suppose we could adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor of adjourning? Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
I think that was unanimous, but we'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Albee?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. See you all in a couple of weeks. I think, no, it's not. We're not doing a meeting this month. So in a month.
Yep.
That's
In a
good.
month.
Well,
Okay.
good night, everybody.
Good week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Carol.